Good afternoon from the sunny Copenhagen, and welcome to the webinar District Energy in Cities, Heating, Cooling and Methodologies for Assessing District Energy Strategies, hosted by Copenhagen Centre on Energy Efficiency. My name is Valeria, and I'm the research assistant at the Copenhagen Centre, and I'm supporting the activities related to energy efficiency webinars. A couple of things before we move to the main content of our webinar. This webinar is going to be about 90 minutes long, including time for Q&A at the end. In case you cannot stay until the end or want to get back to our interesting presentations, all the materials and recordings of the whole webinar will be available online in a few days on the Copenhagen Centre's Knowledge Management System. And we have many other webinars and information there. Have a look. A few things about the Copenhagen Centre. The Centre conducts research and advisory activities in the field of energy efficiency and serves as an energy efficiency hub for the Sustainable Energy for All initiative. The Centre has an established network of global, regional, and national partners with a broad range of stakeholders to help accelerate the implementation of energy efficiency activities. On a regular basis, the Copenhagen Centre is conducting webinars. All materials, including recordings and presentations from previous webinars, can be found on the Copenhagen Centre Knowledge Management System under the e-learning section. The material of today's webinar will be uploaded shortly. I would like to briefly introduce the speakers of today's webinar. Celia Martinez Juez is the Technical Coordinator of Latin America and Africa District Energy Cities Initiatives at UN Environment. Romanas Savickas is a Senior Advisor at the Copenhagen Centre on Energy Efficiency. Zhuolun Chen is a Senior Advisor at the Copenhagen Centre on Energy Efficiency. And Susana Paardekooper is the Project Associate at the Copenhagen Centre on Energy Efficiency. Finally, I would like to inform you that you can send us your questions during the presentations, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can at the end. Please do not forget to mention the name of the panelist that the question is for. And now we can start with Celia's.
Thank you very much, Valeria, for the introduction. I'm going to introduce briefly the District Energy in Cities initiative. This is an initiative from United Nations Environment that supports national and local governments of developing countries and emerging economies to develop district energy projects or refurbish and upgrade the existing ones. First, I would like to briefly explain why is district energy important to United Nations. Well, as you probably know, heating, hot water, and cooling account for 60% of the global energy consumption in buildings, and this is largely met by fossil fuels. We also know that cooling demand will grow exponentially in the next 30 years in selective regions of Asia and Latin America. And we also know that according to some studies, emissions from the building sector would need to be reduced by approximately 75% by 2050 if we would like to keep the global temperature rise below 2 degrees. And what does it mean? That means that if any solution for the climate and the energy transition should explicitly address urban heating and cooling, as well as their interaction with electricity consumption and production. So what is our concept at UN Environment of district energy? So for us, district energy, we see district energy as an enabling technology to integrate higher rates of renewable energy and into the urban energy systems and to improve energy efficiency in the cities. So we realize that all these cities that are leading the energy transition count on district energy actually as a backbone towards zero carbon emissions. So district energy is for us a way to set up the path towards a greener, more sustainable, and smarter city. And why cities want to develop district energy? Because it brings multiple benefits. and they are search for these multiple benefits depending on what they're searching for. So for example, they can reduce hydrofluorocarbon emissions. Some of them look at distributed energy to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Some of them, especially the ones we are working with in the south of Latin America, in Chile, for example, look to improve air quality. Some of them look for lower cost of heating and cooling. Some of them want to improve energy efficiency and energy access, reduce blackouts and grid stress. This is, for example, what's happening in the cases that we're studying in India. Some of them would just want to increase the amount of renewable energy sources, and some of them are looking into greening their economy and gaining resilience. So with these facts in the hand, the United Nations Environment launched the District Energy in Cities initiative during the Climate Summit in New York in 2014. And the initiative was launched as part of the Sustainable Energy for All platform. So the District Energy in Cities initiative is one of the accelerators of the Sustainable Energy for All platform, more precisely the Energy Efficiency Accelerator, and it was considered as one of the 5 key technologies that would help improve doubling the global rate of improvement of energy efficiency by 2030. That is together with buildings, transport, lighting, appliances, and equipment. The program has been financially supported so far by the Green Environmental Facility, by Denmark, and by Italy. So what's our approach? Assisted energy is a well-known technology around the world. What we do is take best practices, adapt them, and replicate them. What we did was a study that was launched 2 years ago and that is available on our website, in which we took examples of 45 champion cities on district energy. We looked at the technologies that they had in place, all the benefits that they were taking from implementing district energy, the policies that they had applied to try to help develop district energy, the business models that they were using, and the national policies that were actually helping the technology to be promoted within the country. And with this, what we did was kind of extrapolate and extract some methodology or key steps for countries and cities to follow to implement district energy. That is, for example, assess existing energy and climate policy objectives and strengthen or develop institutional multi-stakeholder coordination framework, integrate district energy into their national or local energy strategies, map local energy demand, evaluate local energy sources, etc. and etc. Develop or carry out project pre-feasibility, develop business plan. So these were the key steps that we took from the lessons learned from studying all these best practices from 45 champion cities. And what do we do exactly? What does the program, the District Energy in Cities Initiative program, do? Our goal is helping cities, as I said, tackling the energy transition through district energy. The model is a private-public partnership, and we have over 40 partners. And what we do exactly is the following. First, increase awareness raising, increase the knowledge of the benefits of district energy. We work in many countries where district energy has not happened before, so there are no projects on district energy. So we first need to increase the knowledge about the technology and the benefits. Then we provide technical assistance, and that is with the help of the Copenhagen Centre of Energy Efficiency, and my colleagues will talk later. So this technical assistance comes in form of identifying potential pilot projects, undertake feasibility studies, design business models, support the tender process, develop long-term local district energy strategies. Then we try to scale up locally, first establishing a local multi-stakeholder coordination unit within the municipalities where we're working with, and nationally by establishing a national delivery unit sitting or hosted by one of the Ministry of Environment, sometimes the Ministry of Energy, and developing a national regulatory framework to help the projects happen. And then fourth, activities help the cities or the countries unlock investments, design financial mechanisms that can help them address the financial barriers, and support the first projects that come into the market, which is one of the most tricky parts. So where we are in all these countries, 13 countries, 22 cities. Our pilot countries are Chile, Serbia, India, and China. But we're also developing some activities in other countries that you see here in the map, and some of them are just now starting to engage with us, starting to join us. And because they have requested our support, such as the case of Tunisia, for example, or Egypt, which have recently joined. And last, I would just like to explain so that all the audience know some example of implementation. For example, in Morocco, in Marrakesh, where no district cooling, in this case we're working on district cooling, no district energy whatsoever project was happening there at all. So we went there, we explained the technology, we meet with the municipality, we started working with local stakeholders and with the University Politecnico di Milano. We identified a high opportunity area with potential to develop a district cooling project. We have identified it in a touristic area, and we're presenting results of this preliminary pre-feasibility assessment in next month. And we're working with, we are inviting investors, we are inviting the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development and other private companies to join us and try to unlock investment in this project. Well, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. I will be available at the end of the webinar to answer any questions that you might have. You can also email me directly if you wish.
Dear participants, I'm Romanas, Savickas. I'm working in energy sector and in different fields like district heating, energy efficiency, renewables. And today I would like to make a focus on a few things about development of district heating projects in developing countries from greenfield stage, to talk about a little bit district heating and smart thermal grid, the main idea and concept, about district energy and city level mapping to encourage customers and technologies for energy efficiency. Why in principle district heating is required in developing countries? So I will talk a little bit about methodology and principles for district energy development from greenfield projects level. As example will be presented Temuco city case. I will present some technical economical results and about future what will be city after district heating implementation. Why in principle district heating is required in developing countries? So as you know, the effect of air pollution on human health have been well researched internationally. For example, Great Smoke of London caused about 10,000 people die, and more than 100,000 people were made ill. So talking about Temuco city, Temuco has the third worst air quality in Chile. It is estimated that 93% of emission comes in winter months burning wood in wood stoves in single homes. So this very inefficient burning process, burning very humid wood with low caloric value, it produces contaminants such even like formaldehyde, methane, black carbon, and that affect very much people's health. What is the methodology and principles for district heating development in greenfield areas? So as there are no methodologies for district heating rehabilitation, for such cities as there is no district heating at all. So we have to start from greenfield areas, from the 0 point, and one of approaches is bottom-up approach. So to identify the typical housing in Temuco city and to calculate what is energy demand for heating and for hot water in buildings. And after that, to make theoretical calculations, what is heat losses per partitions, windows, walls, roof, and after that to compare with actual consumption, because we can find some kind of information how much of wood we consume in one typical one family building, and after that to know typical housing examples and typical energy demand in these buildings. Next stage will be to design district heating network. So for Temuco city case, I have identified 3 areas in the city: low income residential area, middle income, and high income residential area. And I have designed district heating network in these areas. The main difference is that in low income areas we have smaller buildings, like typical building 57 square meters can be, it can be 1 floor, small buildings, but they are a little bit less dense located on the ground. In high income areas, the buildings in principle are bigger. It can be 2 floors. It even can be 150 square meters heated area, but of course they have nearby grass, so it can be some multi-flat buildings located nearby. So heat density in these areas is a little bit different. So I identified 3 of these areas. I calculated the heating network for these areas and replicated that for all city in Temuco. After that, I designed power plants for the base load. For the base load, I took biofuel, and for the peak load, gas. Usually can be used combination of wood pellets or biomass. The cheapest way is to use biomass. It can be straight collected from the nearby forest. And of course, for peak loads, it's useful to use gas, because the capex installation cost for gas boiler house is much lower, but the price of gas is much bigger. So I made calculations and analyzed optimal proportion between biofuel and gas power distribution, and identified principal areas for power generation in a city. It can be located like it's shown in a picture, or we can make some changes depending on dominated wind in a city or other factors. So in principle, in Temuco city was designed 4-generation low temperature district heating. Total installed capacity for residential area is 380 megawatts. And investments and operation for power generation and power generation installation, operation, district heating network. You can see in tables in total costs, if we apply interest rate of 2%, the energy price will be 0.12 euros per kilowatt hour. If we apply biomass and gas in a proportion 85% and 15% of gas, so with interest rate of 2%, it will be 0.09 euros per 1 kilowatt hour, and cheapest way, for example, if we can get soft loans for Temuco city, so biomass and gas proportion when is 85 and 15%, so energy price even can be 0.08 euros per kilowatt hour. So if comparing one family building, customer average annual payments before district heating and after, so we can see an example. For example, biomass and gas, if we have 2% interest rate, so if they today pay from 400 euros up to 1,000 euros per one heating season, so after district heating will be implemented for the city, the average payment can be per one typical one family building about 980 euros. If it will be biomass and if soft loans will be applied, so energy expenses for energy even can decrease to 900 euros per one heating season. Yeah. So that's all about Temuco case in Chile. Next, my topic is about district heating and smart thermal grid. In principle, grid is referred to as something resembling a framework of crisscrossed parallel bars organized in a certain way. So when you talk about smart grid, usually people think about electricity, but this concept should be switched to smart thermal grid, and applying smart thermal grid, we usually apply demand side management. And for every customer in this case is defined standardized energy consumption. To do this, we have to eliminate different influences like different number of heating season days, inside-outside temperatures, degree days, heated area. And after that, we can compare different buildings or the same buildings in the same conditions, and we can see different energy consumption per one units specialized. And after that, we can make demand side management for district heating network. To do this, of course, the main target is to change load pattern. So to shift load from a curve to a flat. In this case, we increase energy production efficiency because boilers can run on stable regime. We don't have to switch on and switch off them every morning and every evening. And we can, of course, forecast energy load. In this case, also, we can apply renewable energy integration and many different things. Smart management can be performed by different ways, different smart applications, KPI, key performance indicators. You can see a few examples of how to manage this smart thermal grid. For engineering, for technical personnel, it can be understandable, all these graphs, sketches, but for example, for vice president of a company or general director, it can be difficult to understand all these colors and graphs. So for them, it can be applied like you see at the bottom, mobile phone or a computer, just a screen with many green dots. So in principle, if everything is working okay in network, so all green squares are in green color. If something wrong, that means few indicators are not running very well. If half of screen is red, so that means network has many problems. So it can be made even user-friendly, not only for technical people, but and for management level people. So that's all about distinct thermal grid. And next, I would like to talk about district energy and city level energy mapping to encourage customers and technologies for energy efficiency. And I would like to start from a video, like introductory video. So local governments often need more detailed information on energy consumption, future geographical distribution of energy use, neighborhood buildings level, local heat needs, distribution structures. So this can be achieved through an energy mapping process. It analyzes the local conditions such as sources of excess heat, renewable heat assets, geothermal, solar, or whatever it is, and concentrations of heat or cooling demand. So taking into account the principles of energy mapping, some specifics can be applied for every country and for every city. And energy mapping methodologies has been developed and adapted for different cities. For the evaluation of actual energy consumption performance, a separate evaluation criteria, which shows actual consumption of every building, has been developed. So it can be called like energy performance, actual energy performance class for district heating customers, or something in this way. Energy maps for district energy can contain among our data on existing and projected energy consumption, on emissions, on building density, type of building, sources of surplus of industrial heat, large energy consumers, current networks, potential distinct network roads, potential anchor loads, barriers, opportunities, particular to location, relocation, distribution, and of course socio-economic indicators to identify fuel poor areas for customers to know. Making and analyzing data for energy mapping, we cannot just put data on a screen. We have to make a statistical analysis. So for every country and for every city, I make different approach and different methodology. because as you see from a graph, the average and distribution is not in the middle, it's a little bit on the left side. So if you want to present data very clear and understandable, you have to make this statistical big data analysis. And after that, you can present everything in user-friendly form. For example, from 0 to 15 it can be 0, it can be 0 energy consumption building, and 15 for a high energy consumption. So every customer, even if without specific technical engineering background, can understand how much he consumes energy and how efficient this energy consumption is in his building. And for the Belgrade city, we developed special methodology for Belgrade city district heating customers, and energy map for Belgrade area has been created based on a data. The layers on a GIS platform have been created, district heating pipe network and related data, energy performance of final customers. Everything was placed on a GIS platform. You can see on the right few pictures, indices, what you can select and what you would like to see, and all this data are placed and already on a GIS map. What are advantages of energy mapping and energy performance class? So it's analytical tool, and energy map encourages customers for efficient energy use. For example, on the left side, you can see example of Vilnius city case in Lithuania. So one part of a city is in yellow color, orange color. The right bottom is with red and red dots. That means energy consumption is much higher. So you can identify how much you use energy. On a right picture, you can see the comparison graph. If you select one building, for example, you can see a table. What is energy performance of your building compared with the same buildings of the same project type? And as you see an example, energy performance of the selected building, it's much higher comparing to typical average consumption. So in this case, the owners of a building, they start to think, why my building being the same, not reconstructed, not insulated, why this building, our building consume much more energy comparing to the same buildings? So it encourages customers to take active role in energy efficiency. Of course, if buildings are insulated, we can show that on a map. We can put, for example, like in this case, blue line to see. We can compare the same refurbished and insulated buildings, how they consume energy after upgrades, because sometimes it's very difficult when buildings were insulated to analyze, is it economically okay, good or bad, because you have to make energy audit for every building. Applying this methodology, you can see results every year in very fast way. And of course, we can make strategic city energy development plan. We can see which districts can be connected, disconnected, or replace district heating network, or taken other means. So according to energy consumption mapping, we can compare the same buildings. For example, like building in Old Town with heating season, with multi-flat buildings, 3 heating seasons before, because all influential factors like different heating seasons this year and 2 years ago, different heating areas and degrees, everything has been eliminated. So customers take an active role in energy management process, and this stipulates technical progress and upgrade of heating systems inside buildings to install thermostatic valve, individual heat metering, heat substations, and all technical progress inside building. Now you'll see a short video again. In this case, you can see how it works for Belgrade city. You can see how you can log in the system. Now you see Belgrade city map. You can select an area. You can select tools, what you would like to see. District heating network, pipe networks, efficiency, buildings. So in this case, I have selected to show district heating network, pipe network, and building energy efficiency, energy performance class, actual energy consumption class. You can zoom out and you can see buildings in different colors. Some of them are of the same project time, constructed during the same 2 or 3 years, but you see that energy consumption is different in these buildings. So we can deselect to show these values in colors. We can see these values in numbers, and we can compare energy efficiency in different buildings in different areas. Now you have selected one of the buildings and you can see a table. Another building, again, you can get a table about actual energy performance class. Okay, so that was a short information about Belgrade city case. Now I'll show you a second one video. This video is about Vilnius city case in Lithuania. You can see all city, all buildings. You can select background wherever it is. You can see buildings colored in different colors. You can select building. You can see actual energy consumption table on the right side. This year, last year, track records of energy consumption efficiency per last 3 or 5 years. Here you can see example very inefficient building. And final thing, what I would like to show you, like a photogrammetry, which can be used in energy mapping. Photogrammetry can help city buildings to transfer into 3D shapes. So it was transferred as example in Panevėžys city in Lithuania. So quite interesting project, because by the photogrammetry you can make not flat 2D dimensions but 3D dimensions energy mapping. I'll show you how these buildings can be transferred into 3D shape. So by this photogrammetry tool, you can identify building shapes in a city, and for example, after that you can have pictures of every building in a city, and you can see how it looks in reality. And when you apply this photogrammetry, you can apply and for energy mapping this. So now I'll show you an example, last one example, how it can be transferred and works in Panevėžys city. All buildings transferred in 3D shape. As you see, all city was transferred in 3D shape, and you can take a look on a city. You can color buildings and identify energy performance classes. So you can put all this data on this 3D photographic energy map. That's all from my side. Of course, I can talk 2 hours or 2 days, but it's quite short. So my time finished. Thank you for the listening, and please ask question during question ask answers session. Thanks you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm Chen. I'm the senior advisor in Copenhagen Centre on energy efficiency. Today, I'm very glad to join this webinar and present the district cooling system and its rapid assessments in India cities under the support of district energy initiative of UN Environment. So I will have a very brief introduction of the district energy system as well as the district cooling and what is the benefit. So when we talk about district energy, and actually we are talk about the DES produces hot water and chill water in high efficiency centralized plants, and this figure shows out the definition of district cooling. That is, district cooling is defined as a system to combine heating or cooling station and end users through pipeline network. And district cooling is a kind of public service similar to electricity, water, and gas. And the cooling sources could include like waste heat, electrical cooling, free cooling, essential. So in order to satisfy the heating and cooling demand, to ensure the indoor thermal comfort. And this slide shows the research of ADB in 2016, and you can see that actually the district cooling market worldwide is like 45%, around 45% in Americans, and then around 33% in Middle East, in Middle Asia, and then another 20% around is Asian Pacific and Africa. But actually, in 2014, there's another studies foresee the global growth of district cooling market, and it says that in the year of 2019, actually, there's around 10 to 16% of growth, which is in Middle East and Asia. So actually, we will have the question that what is cooled indeed in a district cooling design system. So actually there's three major parts for district cooling system. That is the supply source, and mainly we are talking about district cooling plants. And then there's a distribution system, that is the piping network. And then the last part is the end users, and then normally it contains a metering system, and then also the internal air conditioning system inside the buildings. So actually, what does the district cooling system change compared to a standalone system? So actually, the district cooling system just replace the cooling source, including chillers, cooling towers, and its circulating pumps inside the building, and then they replace it with a heat exchanger. So and then everything inside the building, like HVAC equipments, including air handling units or fan coils, they will be kept all the same. So actually this figure shows that when we replace the cooling source inside a standalone building, actually you can have rooftop garden instead of cooling towers. You can have extra space in the basement instead of like a huge spaces for mechanical rooms of the cooling sources. So there's several benefits of district cooling system that can bring to end users, power plant, environment, and district. For the environment benefit, so because we remove all the cooling towers or split system outdoor, so actually the heat island locally will be lower, and then there will be no noise pollution generated by cooling tower or outdoor split AC. And then actually when you connect it to district cooling, actually you can have extra points in LEED certification system. And for the environment of the region, actually you can have a higher quality of district infrastructure. And also when you connect it to a district cooling system, they always have a multiple energy supply source. So that means always a higher energy reliability. Here is a picture that I take from China and India, and then that is normal that you can see that there's the outdoor facade, they all crowded with split AC systems, and that is really bad. And here is another picture that I took from China, and basically the building, they have installed all the cooling tower on the rooftop, and then the noise generated by the cooling tower, actually they are affecting nearby buildings, as you can see on the right pictures. The noise level is going to be red, which is out of required noise level. That will be around 76 dBA, which is quite harmful for people. And for the LEED ND neighborhood development, and actually when you connect it to district cooling system, you can get extra 3 to 5 points for that. And also because of the diversity of the buildings, actually the cooling capacity installed in a district cooling system can be lower or than standalone buildings. So actually they can contribute to refrigerant phasing out under Montreal Protocol and Kigali Agreement. So here actually we compare different kinds of air conditioning technical solutions, like window AC, standalone, like a centralized system, water cooled or wind cooled. And then when you when you change from those system to district cooling system, always you can save 30%, normally 20 to 30% of refrigerant amount. And then if you utilize extra technologies in the district cooling system, like thermal storage system, tri-generation system, or combine them together, actually you can have more savings of refrigerant. So when we compare the district cooling system, the hybrid system, which is in the middle, to the window AC system or air-cooled standalone system, we can see that more than 40 or 50% of refrigerant amount will be saved, which is a great contribution to Montreal Protocol and Kigali Agreement. So for the end users, actually there are several savings for them. For example, because you do not need to invest on the pumps, chillers, cooling towers, and also the control system installation and construction, and also the electricity and water supply system for the cooling sources. So actually they can save you some amount of investment. Normally that would be around 5 to 15% of the total investment for building. And then because you do not need any cooling sources, so you can save the maintenance fee. And then also because you don't need that much electricity or water supply equipment, so they can also save some maintenance fee for those parts. And also there's extra space for the end users. For example, all the large size of mechanical room has been replaced by a small size heat exchanger mechanical room. So you can save around 80% of the space, and this space can be changed to parking lots or other purposes. And also on the rooftop, because you don't need any cooling towers, so the rooftop can be changed to roof gardens, and then they can have extra incomes for the end user. So because of this benefits of district cooling system, actually we have we as a UN Environment organization actually have under the support of GEF project, we select India, China, Serbia, and also Chile as the pilot country, and then we are doing rapid assessments for these countries in order to scale up the market of district energy. So in India, actually, I'm going to talk about the rapid assessment, which is finished last year on October, and then based on the work we finished, actually we developed a rapid assessment tools to support the fast decision making in the early stage of the project. And here I would like to introduce the rapid assessment of 5 India cities, that is the pilot cities, including Record, Bhopal, Thane, Pune, and Coimbatore. So this rapid assessment is under UN Environment and C2E2 and ICLEI, and then all our other partners like Carbon Trust, Matt Stanford, BESL, Essential, they have support this study. So here is the 5 cities we have the rapid assessment, and as you can see that the space cooling, actually they have consumed quite a lot of electricity in those 5 cities, and as you can see, the monthly electricity consumption, actually it is around 55% as highest in Bhopal, that increase because of space cooling, and in that case, meaning that the city consume quite a lot of energy or electricity on cooling. So actually during the rapid assessment, we are identifying high potential district cooling projects in those 5 pilot cities, and we have some criteria to select these high potential district cooling projects, including like urban area density, and then development type, mixed use type, and control of the buildings. And based on these rapid assessment tasks, actually we develop a rapid assessment technical and eco-analyze tools. And here is the structure of the tool. And basically, we need to input some calculation data like building type and size inside the building, inside the area, and tariff of electricity, water, and also the basic cooling demand in the area, and then based on this information, actually we can input it into the model, and then it will go through the calculation modulars. There are 3 modulars in the tool, including technical analyze modular, financial analyze modular, and economic analyze modular. The aim is to analyze different possible technical solutions and make sure these technical solutions can have economic viability, and then they can support the decision makers to make decision. Okay, which kind of technical solutions they are going to take for the next step of analyze, that is pre-feasibility study or feasibility study. So basically, the output of these tools will including following parameters like eco benefits, including GHG emission, refrigerant phasing out, DC planning requirements, design the hourly cooling profile, building architect type analyze. And then for the financial analysis, actually we will give the result of like life cycle payment. That also be compared between district cooling system and standalone system, and then annual energy and water consumption, O&M fees and cash flow every year, and then payback year and IRR. And then for the economic analysis, it's more like economic sensitivity analysis. So we will outline 3 or 4 most sensitive parameters of the technical solution, and then we will like increase from 0 to 20% and or minus 20% to see the change of IRR and G water price, to make sure that which of the parameters have the most sensitive effects or impacts on the economic viability of the project. So basically, we will parametric analysis of cooling demand, investment, energy tariff, and thermal energy storage. So here is some of the results, like from the life cycle, like 22 years, actually, what is the benefit for district cooling compared to the standalone system. So normally it's like 20% lower in this life cycle period for district cooling. And also for these 5 cities, actually, they have different IRRs, and the highest one is Tanay and Plain, and then the lowest one is Comator and Record. And here is also some benefit benefits from the environment, like CO2 emission savings, and also like electricity demand reduction, peak power demand reduction, and also some potential technical solutions can be applied to the district cooling system in this area, including thermal storage, including the integration of renewable energies. And also based on the rapid assessment analysis, we also outline the citywide policy recommendations, including like establish a multi-stakeholder coordination group, assess how district cooling can meet city goals and targets, and all this stuff is like policy level. And then as you can see from the figure, actually, Tanay has the most policy basis among those 5 cities. And so actually I will show you more results of the rapid assessment in Tanay, which is the pilot city. And here is our pilot project. It is located in Haranandani Estate community, and we choose it because it is a fast expanding mixed-use development. In this location, actually, it includes business park, IT offices, residential buildings, hospitals, and also like campus buildings as well. And then we believe that based on this developed community, actually, they have the potential to replication to other regions in the city of Tanay, or to other cities in India. And another reason we choose this pilot project is because the TMC, which is the local government, is quite keen to provide these district cooling development property incentive policies. And according to the technical economic assessment results, the district cooling system size would be around 16,000 refrigerant tons. The IRR is around 70%. Payback years is 10 years. And here is the rapid assessment output template, and it contains all the results for the technical analysis, including the build-up area analyzed in the region, the hourly cooling demand profile for the design day inside the region, and also when we use the district cooling system, what is the annual CO2 emission, and compare district cooling and standalone system, and also the refrigerant amount, comparing different kinds of standalone systems to district cooling systems. And here is the result of the financial analysis, and then basically we analyze 22 years, which is the whole life scale of the system, and we compare this total payment of district cooling system and standalone system. And this slide shows that the result, some of the result of the economic sensitive analysis. So basically, we outline 5 most sensitive parameters to affect the chi water price, and then we change it from plus 15% to minus 15%, and then to see how it affects on the IRR or on the chi water price. So this is some of the results, like cooling supply, that means the cooling demand, and the TES thermal energy storage system. We take ice storage, for example, and then we analyze the different percentage of ice storage amount and the chi water price, and also on the off-peak electricity price, and how it affects on the chi water price. And so the next step, actually, we have a very good template for the rapid assessment, technical eco analyze tool for this application in India. And the next step will include we calibrate this tool with benchmarking data in these 5 cities. And then we are trying to adapt these tools to other countries for a widely used purpose. And then we will integrate more different kinds of district energy system types, including like child generation. And actually right now we have adapted this software to Malaysia, and we develop a rapid assessment tool for child generation, and then it's now I'm using to the rapid assessment process in Malaysia. Here is my all of my presentation, and please I'm quite welcome to any questions. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. And thank you for being here. My name is Susana Paardekooper. I'm the 3rd member of our little district energy team in Copenhagen. I work as a project associate for the Copenhagen Centre for Energy Efficiency in this district energy and cities project from UN Environment. And I'm going to kind of pick up where Zhuolun left off and talk about the different planning methodologies that we've been trying to develop and that we've been trying to use. One of the interesting things about this project is that we're both doing really local work in the terms of these pilot projects. But at the same time, we're trying to develop tools and methodologies that we can replicate and that we can usefully use in different contexts as well. So I'll focus a little bit more than Romanas and Zhuolun on the long-term planning of district energy, specifically also a little bit more on the country level, and look at the kind of overall potential for district energy for countries, and also the potential to integrate it with other sectors. My background is actually in energy systems analysis, so the interaction between district energy and the power sector and the transport sector. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the methodologies that we've been trying to develop and been looking at developing here today. So to start with, it helps a little bit to backtrack and think about what we mean specifically when we talk about heating and cooling from an energy planning perspective. Most energy planning has traditionally focused on the power sector and electricity planning and access to electricity. But thermal energy is a really interesting one. Celia talked about why it's important that we do something about it fairly quickly. But it is different from other energy sectors. Heating specifically has always been considered as inherently local. Part of the kind of nature of thermal energy is that it doesn't travel so well. So when cities are trying to do this kind of planning, if they are, then they typically have to deal with local geographies that they have, water barriers, mountain barriers, the soil terrain, and those kind of things. And that's something that doesn't really affect other sectors. The second thing is that buildings play a large part in how the thermal sector develops. And because of the ownership issues and because of the way that buildings develop and are planned in general, it's a kind of very different nature from your typical power and transport and industry sectors. When we talk about cooling, then it's a very difficult thing to plan in general, because as Zhuolun was explaining, it has to do with the electricity bills, and it's very difficult from an energy system perspective to differentiate between how much of that electricity is going for cooling and how much of that electricity is going for other uses. And this all leads us to a position where heating is done in much more diverse and varying ways than other energy sectors typically are. When we look at the different pilot countries that we have within this project, then it varies from being kind of old district energy systems in Belgrade to very biomass based, but also areas where gas is commonly used. There's parts of the world where kind of the coal boilers are still happening a lot. So this kind of big diversity means that it's very difficult to plan based on the current framework conditions, and it becomes more difficult to plan towards a common framework. What we can take from this is that when we try to do these kind of plans in these strategic energy analyses, then we have to somehow include this spatiality into it. We have to include the geographic dimension in the sense of where the buildings are located in the city, but also how the city is located in terms of the resources that it has. And that's a very particular one because heating is a little bit different than electricity. And when we start looking at district cooling systems, we can take cooling in there as well. So we can think of district energy as being more dependent on the resources that are in the near vicinity. And that means that spatial dimension becomes very important. So that having been said, there are general commonalities between the different district energy strategies and heating and cooling strategies that we can develop. One of the things that has come up more recently in the last few years, and actually in the last few months with the Kigali Agreement as well, is that both heating and cooling have a very significant role to play. Even in areas which aren't traditionally thought of as areas where cooling has to take place. I mean, we live here in Copenhagen, and Copenhagen actually has a district cooling system, but also, as pointed out in the last few days, a high cooling need, even though it's a Scandinavian country and we spend most of the year shivering away. Even in places like Europe, there's long been an assumption that the south of Europe doesn't necessarily have a demand for heating. But when we start looking at cooling days and domestic hot water and the role that it plays in the energy system, there's actually a fairly significant demand for it. The second thing that we find the more and more we do this, and a lot of this work is being developed in Europe, but also when we start looking at places outside of Europe, is that most local municipalities, be that if they're super urban or super rural, have some type of heating and cooling source. And that has a lot to do with the fact that there are a lot of different sources available for heating and cooling. When we start spatially mapping things like waste heat, be that from cogeneration of electricity or from industrial sources, from waste incineration, then there's nearly always something available within a 20, 30 kilometer radius. If an area has access to water, then heat pumps become a really attractive option because they can transfer the kind of heat, in a sense, that is in that water. It doesn't feel very warm, but because it's more than 0 degrees, we can still pump heat out of it. That becomes a very attractive option. And even if we go to more rural places, then bioenergy becomes a good option to be able to generate this kind of energy. Romanas was talking about Chile and Temuco specifically, where there's a lot of residual waste that comes out of the forests, and that's something that we can always use. And geothermal and solar thermal energy are also widely available. So when we try to make these heating and cooling strategies, one of the common things that we see is that it's not so much about finding the waste sources or finding the sources for heating and cooling, but more looking at the specific mix that is available in that place and putting them together in a comprehensive way. The other thing is that when we focus on cities, cities per definition are a lot of people put together in a relatively small space. And the kind of pure nature of cities that is based on this density and this easy access to each other as people and easy access to each other in a physical sense in terms of the fabric of the city also means that it aggregates heat demand. And when we think about energy planning and district energy specifically, that helps because it reduces the infrastructure costs that we need. Because when we look at district heating and cooling, the infrastructure costs are relatively high if we compare it to something like power. That becomes a really important factor. And that also means that cities are really the key place where we should start looking at these kind of technologies. The last thing that we found as we've kind of been looking at more and more of these strategies and trying to look at the different ways that we can apply technologies in a district energy setting is that most production and storage technologies are cheaper if you buy them at a larger scale. It's kind of like bulk buying, but if you look at the graph to the right at the bottom in the gray, then there's a comparison between small thermal storage and larger thermal storage. And the axis to the left is logarithmic, so it goes by kind of a multiplication of 10. And it basically means that the more we can store together, the smaller the capacity costs are. And that becomes interesting when we start looking at more integrated, smart, renewable energy systems. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The other thing that we like to point out when we talk about commonalities and when we talk about things which are very common when we make these district energy strategies is that it's important to keep looking at the power sector because most of the places where we make strategic heating and cooling planning, we're also trying to do strategic energy planning. And one of the big barriers in efficiency and energy planning is the conversion losses in the power sector. So if you have a power plant, then you'll typically lose more than half of the energy that you put in waste heat. And that's something where district energy can really come in together. The graph at the top with colors is for Europe, but it basically shows that the loss between the primary energy supply and the final consumption, so the loss between the fuel that goes into the conversion technology and that which comes out of it, in terms of the reduction in that light green barrier, is about the same as the actual end use in terms of heat for buildings and heat for industry, which in Europe are the two main consumers of heat. So it's not to say that necessarily all of that heat can be recovered and heat every single building, but it shows how kind of comprehensive the losses are in the power system and how district energy can play a role in at least trying to attempt to deal with those efficiency losses. So what does that mean? When we have these kind of general guidelines that we can use and that we see reoccurring in all the places where we're trying to do strategic heating and cooling development, we can take a few different kind of parameters and perspectives that we can use in a regular way. We know that the tools and the methodologies that we're developing need to include an element of spatial planning. And that spatial planning is on the level of energy demand, but also on the level of energy supply. So we need to go into the different areas and have a look at what the energy demands are. Romanas showed you the examples that we have at the building level, but also at what the different supply technologies are that are available. Be that, as in the case in Temuco, the easy availability of biomass, or in the case of the district cooling systems that Zhuolun is investigating in India, on the level of what type of chillers we can use. When we look at the built environment, then we need to take it into account because it basically drives the energy demand. One of the things that you can see when you look at the tool that Zhuolun has developed is that really the demand is what drives, what is one of the drivers of the eventual profitability of it. So to be able to understand the demand, we have to be able to understand the built environment. And without that, it becomes very difficult to do any type of strategic planning. And then the third thing is to take into account the wider energy system. And by the wider energy system, it is that interaction both with the transport sector, but when it comes to district energy, particularly with the power sector. When we're looking at how to power these district energy systems, then for cooling, quite often it's electricity, be that directly or via heat pump. When we're looking at heating, then it can be either a direct boiler, but preferably it's also some kind of combined heat and power production. So that has an impact, and I'll show an example of that later. And that needs to be taken into account when we make these analyses for cities, but also for countries. And then the last thing is to look at the enabling framework conditions. Zhuolun showed you the overview of the different policy analyses that were made in India, but when we start looking at planning forward and planning for the future, then those recommendations become really important, and we really need to start looking at the kind of 20-year and 50-year conditions that are necessary in order to support and incentivize these more efficient solutions. So those are then the kind of guiding principles that we talk about when we're looking specifically at the kind of cross-country methodologies that we're looking for planning. I'd like to give an example that we've been working on, but that isn't really finished. So There's no final results to show you, but it gives an indication of how we can include these elements into the work that we do. The thing that we'll be trying to develop is something which we've been calling Heat Roadmap Chile. It's based very much on the methodologies of a project which is done in several installments called the Heat Roadmap Europe project, both methodologically but also in terms of the types of questions that it's trying to answer. Basically, we're doing a countrywide analysis where we're looking at what we say roughly is the cost and the potential for district energy, taking a long-term vision, so looking also at 2050 and 2030, but based on a spatial disaggregation of the energy demands and resources, so taking into account where they're located and what they could be linked to and where they could be hooked up to. Basically, by doing that, we can get both the cost of building infrastructure. If we can find the different heat demand densities in areas, then we can estimate how much it would cost to have district heating or district cooling in different areas. And we can start kind of linking the different resources to the different demands. We base this on a top-down GIS analysis. So in that sense, it's very different from what Romanas is doing, because it very specifically is based on a regression analysis. It doesn't measure data from on the ground and then try to apply that to other places, but rather we take countrywide data and then we try to kind of spread that geographically over the whole country. The second thing that we'll do is have a look at the energy system analysis. So based on that, we can simulate the energy system as it is today, as it is according to the reference scenario that the government has built for 2050, but also then according to what that would look like if we did include district energy, what that would look like if we did try to put in a level of combined heat and power or heat pumps. There's very high potential for solar energy in the north of the country, so how that could affect the energy system. And then we'll basically try to look at all these different findings and see if we can form both a kind of project typology and something useful to say about the enabling framework conditions. So I'll show an example in a second, but we can start looking at what kind of projects we would then expect to see. If we simulate the energy system with a high level of district energy, what that would mean in terms of the investments that are necessary for the distribution technologies, but also for the production technologies of the heating and the cooling. So the first step is then to map it all. What you have here is an example of a similar map that we've made, that we made last year for the Netherlands, for the Rotterdam region. And this is extremely detailed because this is the fourth installment, but it's basically what we're trying to look at. It's not done on a building level, it's done on a hectare level. And again, that's because it's based on a regression analysis. So it's based on, it's a statistical model effectively of the country and where we expect the heat demands to be, based on what the land use is, where the roads are, what the population is in the different hectares. So it's not a realistic depiction. It's a statistical model of what the depiction would be. And actually, in this level, it's fairly accurate. We're still working on increasing the accuracy very much for the Chilean project, but this one works fairly well. The other thing you can see is the heat supply options. So Rotterdam is pretty famous for its harbor, and there are a lot of different chemical industries, petrochemical kind of refineries, and also a few power plants in that harbor. So you can see where those are, and then based on this, we can start spatially linking them and looking at the cost of transmission grids, looking at the cost of the distribution grids within the city, and whether it makes sense to link these different sources to those distribution grids. That basically allows us to do that work where we identify the resources for the district energy and we identify a rough potential for the district energy based on a cost. We use that data then to move towards an energy system analysis. That never looks as nice. This isn't as nearly as exciting a picture. But it's basically a simulation of the energy system. So we take all the power plant capacity, we take all the power plant production, we look at the different heating demands and the heating production. In Chile at the moment, the overlarge majority of it is biomass. There's a little bit of electricity, but it's pretty much based on biomass burners, which are kind of less efficient than biomass boilers. So we take all these different conversion technologies into account, we input the resources, and then we simulate the energy model. We simulate the operation of the different conversion technologies, and we simulate basically the balancing of the demands and the supplies. One of the reasons that this is interesting to do for district energy, and that this is actually quite an important element of looking at the impact of district energy outside of the kind of immediate cost for the consumers, is that district energy can have a massive influence on how sustainable the energy system is as a whole. It's a really key technology in terms of decarbonizing not just the heating sector, but also the power sector. The example we have here is basically, it's a bit simplistic, but it can show you how we can use district energy to integrate more kind of intermittent renewables, is what we call them, but solar energy into the energy system without kind of reverting to uses of batteries and those kind of more expensive options. Basically, you can link the solar electricity that's being produced via a heat pump or an electric boiler into the district energy system, following the kind of orange arrows as you go along. And the district energy makes that particularly attractive, both because heat pumps are more efficient if you use them at this kind of larger scale, and they're fundamentally cheaper. The use of thermal storage, I showed the graph earlier in the black and white, where you could see that the larger you make your thermal storage, it becomes exponentially cheaper in terms of the capex. So being able to kind of have these interactions in the energy system at a larger scale, because we're using district energy, is a really important thing, not just for the heating and cooling sector, but also for the energy system as a whole. So that's one of the things that we can then fairly quickly simulate and work with. And those are models that we can replicate for the different countries as well, in order to kind of determine the impact of district energy, but also start looking at what the potential could be in the future. So that leaves us with a variety of findings that we can then kind of start plugging into the planning process. The first thing in terms of the planning process is really kind of more results-based. But basically, we can start looking at what kind of technology combinations will be more likely. The top kind of pie chart is, I guess, pretty self-evident. But again, it's based on Europe. But one of the things that came out of that was that we could show people how the district heating, which we simulate, is being produced. So if we assume a level of district energy of about 50% in Europe by 2050, then we can see that a lot of it comes from excess energy from electricity generation, so combined heat and power. Some of it comes from industry, some of it comes from waste and geothermal. But the real surprise was large-scale heat pumps. When we started disseminating this and giving this to people, then everyone had kind of realized that district energy would come from cogeneration and industrial excess heat. But this inclusion of large-scale heat pumps was a bit more of a surprise, and that allowed us to start looking more specifically at how to make that happen. And this is something that we hope to be able to do for the country, so we can give the country policymakers a kind of better idea of how to break down a future with a high level of district energy, but also on the city level. And then the second thing that we can do is we can start giving a more kind of refined idea of where the investments need to be made. We can break this down into where the investments go in terms of the distribution costs, in terms of kind of basically just putting down the piping. How much of it goes into the actual generation capacities for the power, well, for the energy that's supplying these heating and cooling functions? How much goes into heat exchangers? How much goes into the transmission network versus the distribution network? And those kind of discussions we can start breaking down in more detail. Especially if we combine this with the work that's done in the rapid assessments, which Zhuolun talked about, and the deep assessments, which we'll come back to, I guess, in a future instance. But if we can link this to those policy analyses that are made in different areas, then that becomes really valuable, because we can link the barriers and the opportunities with the long-term planning that comes out of this. So that's great. The second thing that I wanted to mention, just before we kind of move on to the questions, is that the advantage of these kind of general methodologies and general tools, and I mean that in kind of a specific way, in that they're general because they don't necessarily have to be applied to a country. They're not designed specifically for a country, but they're designed to use in different countries, is that we can then spread them and we can start adapting them. So, of course, we'll be kind of communicating the results and the way that we did these things. But the other thing we can do is we can basically give local stakeholders and local parties the models, both in terms of the GIS mapping. It's basically just a regression analysis, so it's a code. And we can give that, and then that can be refined in the future as better data becomes available. And similarly for the energy system analysis, those models are freely and publicly available. So someone else can come in and start refining that analysis and making alternatives, and basically it becomes a what if analysis. What if I decided to add a lot of heat pumps? What if I decided to build a gas connection to Argentina, which is something which in Chile plays a little bit. So those are the kind of things that can be done with the tools, and that extends further than just the lifetime of this project, basically. And through that, we also kind of hope to be able to kickstart more local mapping. One of the things that will come out of this is the interesting areas where it does make sense to do bottom-up mapping. You could tell probably from Romanas's presentation that it's very labor intensive, and it's a lot of really hard work to get to these really great results. Whereas these kind of general planning methodologies don't necessarily aim to get that level of detail, but it allows for an identification of where you should put that effort. So I'm quite aware that we're pretty much into the question time. I'm sorry for that. This is just a slide summarizing what I said. District energy is very local because it's based on this kind of heating and cooling, and those are very specific to the geography that is there, but also the local resources that exist. But at the same time, it's not necessary to say that because district energy is local, there is no reason to do uniform planning and we can't share methodologies. We can still kind of share and replicate the different methodologies that we develop as long as we adapt them as we go along. The second point is that when we develop these methodologies, we need kind of integrated approach, because it doesn't make sense to look at district energy without looking at the spatial element, the built environment, the energy system, and the different framework conditions and policies that exist in place. And through the example, I hope that I can quickly show that when we do this kind of top-down modeling, we can give really interesting results. They're not necessarily super refined in the sense that there's a large margin of error and there's a level of inaccuracy based on the fact that it is a model and it's a top-down modeling rather than necessarily a bottom-up replication of reality. But it can allow us to start looking at the future and start working with what we would like the future to be like and preparing and planning for it. So if there's any questions, then I'd be happy to answer them. You can ask them here, I guess, but you can also email or get in touch otherwise. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all these very interesting presentations. And now we can move forward towards the questions for our panelists. Here we have a question for Celia. One of our participants asked, how are the pilots selected for the District Energy Initiative? Thank you, Celia.
Sorry, could you repeat that? How are the what?
How are the pilots selected?
Okay. Well, there is a criteria that we have developed. We basically selected together with the countries. So, for example, in Chile, what we did was a call for cities to apply. So we basically prepared this call for cities with the Ministry of Energy and with the Ministry of Environment, and this call was published, and then cities applied, and then based on that we selected the ones that we thought that had more higher opportunity to develop a district or higher potential to develop a district heating project. I say district heating because it's in the case of Chile, and it has been the case in other countries too. So the procedure is prepare a call for cities so that it is published, and then cities can apply. And based on that, together with the national representatives of the country, we select the five cities that have higher potential for district energy. So that's how we do it, based on density, based on resources like natural resources that they have, energy resources available, and all these kind of things like existing environmental policies that they have in place, and political commitment. That's one of the things. So that's more or less very briefly explain the way we go.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And now a question for Romanas regarding the economic results in Temuco City. What period of time is this plant to be operational? Thank you.
Hi. So in economical analysis, the typical 20 years lifetime is for power plant, and for district heating network, of course, it was assumed to have very innovative plastic pipes, so more than 30 years, 30 up to 40 years life cycle.
Thank you, Romanas. And here's another question for Celia. One of the participants wonders whether you're working with the International District Energy Association. Thank you.
Yes, we are. The IDEA is one of the partners of the District Energy in Cities initiative, and they come to our events. Actually, I will be participating in the conference of IDEA in Vancouver. So yes, we are partners and we help each other. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Celia. And now a question for Susana regarding community energy systems. Susana, so community energy systems are arising as a promising solution for electricity decentralization in some countries of Europe. Do you see as a possibility the creation of an initiative organization such as District Energy, but focus only on this kind of electricity generation in community level? Do you think that this could be helpful to transfer those experiences as new public policies for developing countries? Thank you.
I don't think that I really have the insight as to whether or not that will happen, but I can give you a kind of opinion. I think that should happen. I think that one of the really interesting things when we talk about community energy projects is that you can both have this kind of local ownership, and I think that when people have local ownership, they also have a kind of higher degree of commitment and consideration about it, and just a more kind of community level deliberation about what should happen. And at the same time, it still combines this kind of what I talked about, this return to scale that, I mean, you see it in heat, but you also see it in things like electricity. It makes more sense to have a larger kind of field of solar panels than necessarily for everyone to put an individual solar panel on their roof. So I don't really know if it will happen, but I think it should happen. And if it does happen, then I would also recommend that it happens in tandem. I mean, it makes sense if you're doing community level energy that you would do community level electricity, but also community level district energy in terms of heating and cooling. You can get really nice combinations between solar thermal district heating systems and heat pumps, which kind of both take advantage of the thermal energy that you can get out of a certain area and large scale storage systems. And then with the heat pump, you could use something like a community wind turbine. So when you get that interplay at the community level, which is really exciting, then I wouldn't just kind of stick to it with electricity, but just combine the two and go for a kind of a true district energy approach with both heating and cooling and electricity.
Thank you very much, Susana, for your insight. And now last question for Romanas. Romanas, could you please elaborate more on the standardized energy consumption? Thank you very much.
Yeah, about energy consumption. So I take a bottom-up approach, and energy mapping, city-level energy mapping includes actual energy data. And it's nothing common with building performance certificate. What buildings you have theoretical class from A, B, C, D. Yeah, it's theoretical, but actually buildings can consume absolutely different amount of energy, plus minus 20-30%. So in total it can be 40-60% fluctuations. Yeah, so my approach is bottom-up approach, and I use actual data. I eliminate all influential factors, so I can compare buildings between one buildings with absolutely different buildings or with the same buildings. And another thing I would like to add that this energy mapping, what I made for district heating, it also is applicable and for district cooling, and even it can be much more easy, because for district heating we can have 10,000 consumers or much more. For district cooling maybe less. So we can make an energy map, actual energy consumption map for district cooling, and if anyone is interested, it can be interesting for countries with cooling potential. So please just let me know. Thank you.
So thank you very much for the detailed responses to the questions. So ladies and gentlemen, finally we come to the end of the webinar. I would like to say a big thank you to all the panelists for the informative and interesting presentations, and to the audience for their active participation. The presentation will be beneficial for all stakeholders involved in energy efficiency. Once again, thank you for your attention and wish you a good day or night from the sunny Copenhagen.